In the Bible, God does something unsettling. Before the chaos begins, before the judgments fall, before the world starts to fracture, he seals people. Not cities, not temples, not nations, people. And that alone should stop us, because sealing sounds like protection. But the timing tells a different story. They are not sealed to be spared from suffering. They are sealed to be assigned to it. That raises uncomfortable questions we often rush past. Why seal people, not places? Why choose a specific number instead of everyone? And why do it before judgment, not after the danger has passed? If this were about mercy alone, God could have waited. But he didn't, because this isn't about favoritism. It's about function. Tonight isn't about decoding numbers or arguing timelines. It's about something far more personal. It's about understanding why God prepares certain people to stand before everything around them collapses, and why those preparations often feel like pressure long before they make sense. Stay with me before I reveal why God sealed the 144,000 before the storm ever came. Pause for a moment and subscribe, so you don't miss the deeper truths we uncover each week here on the Bible in Black. And if you're someone who keeps praying even when life feels heavy, confusing, or unfinished, I've created something to walk with you. Alongside a 31-day devotional with the women of the Bible, I've also released an ebook and audiobook called For the Woman Who Prays But Still Feels Broken. Both are designed for seasons when God feels quiet, yet faith refuses to let go. Whether you prefer to read or listen, you'll find the links in the pinned comment or description. If you'd like to get your copy today, when people hear about the 144,000, the questions come fast. Who are they? Are they literal? Are they symbolic? Are they Jewish only? Is this about ethnicity, salvation, or end-time rankings? Those questions aren't wrong, but they are secondary. Because the text itself doesn't start there. The book of Revelation doesn't first ask us who they are. It asks us why they are marked before anything else happens. Why are they sealed first, before the winds are released? Before the earth is struck? Before history turns violent? Revelation is not written like a newspaper. It's written like a mirror. Apocalyptic writing doesn't just predict events. It exposes patterns, psychological patterns, spiritual patterns, patterns of how humans respond when control is stripped away. That's why symbols matter more than statistics here. And that's why sealing matters more than identity. Because sealing is not about escape. It's about authorization. A seal doesn't remove danger. It grants permission to stand inside it. It means you belong to something higher than what's coming. You answer to a different authority than the chaos. So, before we ask who the 144,000 are, we have to face the harder question. Why does God always secure identity before he allows instability? To understand why the sealing comes first, we have to slow down and ask a deeper question. What does sealing even mean in Scripture? In the ancient world, a seal was never decorative. A seal meant ownership. It meant purposeful protection. And it meant authority to act in someone else's name. A sealed object didn't belong to itself anymore. It carried the weight of whoever sealed it. That's why this matters, because God doesn't seal people to hide them. He seals them so they can't abandon their assignment. We've seen this pattern before. In the book of Exodus, Israel is marked before judgment moves through Egypt. The mark doesn't remove fear. It establishes identity in the middle of it. In the book of Ezekiel, a mark is placed on the foreheads of those who grieve over corruption before destruction begins, not to exempt them from witnessing collapse, but to distinguish who still belongs to God while it happens. And in Revelation, servants are marked before the winds are released, before chaos, before loss, before the unraveling. This is the consistent pattern. God always marks people before pressure, not after, because pressure doesn't create identity. It exposes it. And the seal is not a shield from difficulty. It is a reminder stamped into the soul of who you answer to when everything else starts demanding your allegiance. That's what sealing really means. There's a reason the sealing happens before judgment begins. Because judgment doesn't destroy faith. It reveals it. Chaos doesn't create belief. It exposes what belief was already resting on. If God waited to seal them after the storm, that would be protection. But sealing them before the storm is preparation, and preparation is far more demanding than protection. Preparation means God is not removing the fear. He's stabilizing identity inside it. The seal doesn't calm the environment. It anchors the person. That's why the timing matters. When the world begins to shake, people don't suddenly decide who they are. They default to what they've already been grounded in. Fear doesn't ask permission. Loss doesn't give warnings. Pressure doesn't pause for prayer. So God secures identity first, not so they won't fall, but so they won't forget who they are while falling. They weren't sealed so they wouldn't stumble. They were sealed so the stumble wouldn't redefine them. Because when everything familiar collapses, the most dangerous thing is not fear, it's confusion. And the seal exists to answer the question chaos always asks. At some point, we have to face the question we usually avoid. Why a number at all? Why doesn't the text just say a great group or many people or the faithful? Why 144,000? In Scripture, numbers are rarely about math. They're about meaning. 12 has always represented divine order. It speaks of structure, not chaos. 12 tribes, 12 foundations, 12 apostles. When 12 is multiplied by 12, it's not repetition. It's reinforcement. It's the idea of completeness. God's people fully formed, fully aligned, fully accountable. And when that is multiplied by 1,000, it's not exaggeration. It's magnitude, fullness, reach, weight. So 144,000 is not a head count. It's a profile. It describes a kind of people, not a quota God is trying to fill. People who are structured, not scattered. Disciplined, not impulsive. Accountable, not autonomous. Intentional, not accidental. This number doesn't describe how many they are. It describes how formed they are. Because God doesn't seal crowds. Crowds panic. Crowds follow noise. Crowds dissolve under pressure. God seals those who can carry clarity when confusion becomes contagious. That's why the number matters, not because it limits salvation, but because it defines responsibility. There's a question most of us hesitate to ask. If God can seal people, why not seal everyone? The answer isn't comfortable, because not everyone wants responsibility. Most people just want relief. They want the pressure to stop, the pain to ease, the chaos to pass. But sealing is not relief, it's responsibility. Sealed people are visible not because they are louder, but because they are steadier. They are identifiable not by what they say, but by what they can endure without abandoning who they are. They don't disappear when truth becomes inconvenient. They don't blend in when compromise becomes popular. They don't rush to safety when conviction demands presence. In moments of pressure, most people look for somewhere to hide. The sealed don't. Because being sealed means you lose the privilege of disappearing. You don't get to dissolve into the crowd when obedience becomes costly. You don't get to pretend neutrality when clarity is required. The seal marks people who can be seen without being shaken, not because they are fearless, but because they are anchored. And that's why not everyone is sealed. Because visibility is a burden only the prepared can carry. There's a part of sealing that's almost never taught, because it doesn't inspire applause. Being sealed is costly. It's lonely, not because people leave, but because fewer people understand. You carry clarity in rooms that prefer comfort. You see consequences where others see options, and that creates distance you didn't ask for. Being sealed also comes with expectation, not public expectation, but internal expectation. You don't get the luxury of saying someone else will handle it. You feel responsibility before anyone assigns it, and often before anyone notices. There is very little applause for the sealed, no celebration for restraint, no recognition for endurance, no reward for staying when leaving would be easier. Because the seal doesn't make life easier. It makes retreat impossible. These people aren't sealed from pain. They are sealed through pain, meaning the pain doesn't disqualify them. It forms them. The misunderstanding doesn't weaken them. It clarifies them. The silence doesn't break them. It deepens them. And this is why many admire the idea of being sealed, but quietly resist the reality. Because the seal doesn't just mark who you belong to. It marks what you must carry. Something unusual happens in Revelation when the sealed remain steady. Chaos doesn't calm down. It escalates. That's important because truth doesn't always quiet deception. Often it agitates it. When people are anchored in a moment that rewards panic, their stillness becomes confrontational, not because they are attacking, but because they are unmoved. Stability exposes instability. You don't notice how frantic a room is until someone refuses to rush. You don't see how fragile a system is until someone stands without flinching. And that's what the sealed do. They don't fight chaos. They reveal it by not panicking. In Revelation's imagery, the sealed don't shout over the storm. They don't compete with it. They simply stand, and their presence makes the storm louder. Because chaos depends on participation. It feeds on reaction. It multiplies through fear. When someone refuses to join it, its emptiness becomes obvious. This is why the sealed are often misunderstood. They are accused of being cold when they are simply anchored. They are called detached when they are actually disciplined. They are seen as passive when they are choosing restraint. The sealed don't expose deception by arguing with it. They expose it by surviving without becoming it. And in a collapsing world, that kind of stillness is disruptive. Let's be clear about something. This isn't about claiming a title. It's not about deciding, I must be one of them. That's not the point. This is about recognizing a pattern. Patterns don't flatter. They confront. So instead of asking, am I sealed? Ask quieter questions. Are you someone God seems to prepare early, long before others see the need? Do you find yourself ready for moments people around you insist are still far away? Do you carry a sense of responsibility you didn't volunteer for and can't quite explain? Do you feel pressure without instruction? Wait without recognition? Preparation without applause? Because preparation without explanation is often a sign of sealing, not a guarantee, not a badge, but a pattern. God doesn't always explain why He's training you ahead of time. He just does. And often, the explanation only becomes clear when others begin scrambling for ground you were quietly taught to stand on years earlier. This isn't about elevating yourself. It's about noticing whether your life has been shaped for steadiness more than comfort. That needs to be spoken gently. Not everyone who is gifted is sealed, and not everyone who is sealed is visible. Giftedness attracts attention. Sealing requires surrender. They are not the same. Sealing is formed in places where applause can't follow. It requires discipline when no one is watching. Obedience when there is no affirmation. Faithfulness when silence is the only feedback you receive. Some people are loud because they are gifted. Others are quiet because they are sealed, not because they are hiding, but because the work being done in them doesn't need an audience yet. Sealing doesn't come from ambition. It comes from consent. Consent to be shaped, consent to be restrained, consent to obey without immediate understanding. And that consent is heavy. If you want the seal, you must accept the weight of responsibility, the weight of restraint, the weight of being accountable to God even when no one else is aware. Because sealing is not about being chosen to be seen. It's about being trusted to remain steady when no one is watching. When all of this is stripped back, one truth remains. God sealed the 144,000. First, because storms don't wait for people to be ready. Preparation always comes before collapse. Identity always comes before pressure. By the time the winds are released, it's already too late to decide who you belong to. The seal was never about privilege. It was about stability. It wasn't about who they were when everything was calm. It was about who they could still be when everything familiar was stripped away, when certainty disappeared, when structures failed, when comfort collapsed, when the crowd scattered. The seal answered one question that chaos always asks: who are you now? And that answer had already been settled long before the storm arrived. This story doesn't end here.